The Baltimore Ravens select Nate Wiggins, corner from Clemson at number 30. We break down the pick, talk about what it means for the Ravens, get into Wiggins and who he is, all that and more coming up on a very late night live edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens, right here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Thank you so much for being here, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. Free and available, all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form on YouTube, where we are live streaming right now, also in audio form, wherever you get your podcasts. We're everywhere. We're doing a bunch of Ravens draft content. Obviously, this is a very, very late live stream. We're about 2 a.m. starting this off on the East Coast. So if you're listening, I really appreciate it, especially on these late night streams here. Just did a 5.5 hour essentially marathon with the Ryan Ripken show, which was awesome. Bunch of guests. But here on Locked On Ravens, we're going to be talking about everything Nate Wiggins. So I'm excited for this one. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates who want to talk to you faster. Post your job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. That's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Nate Wiggins, the selection at number 30 for the Ravens. Oh, man. And Zach Bollinger checking in, saying they really let the best player in the draft fall to the Ravens. They never learned. Zach, I appreciate you, man. Zach was one of the people on the live stream with me on the Ryan Ripken show. Be sure to check out all of Zach's content. He better produce, Zach. I'm telling you that. So we're going to be diving into everything Wiggins, talking about who he is, his athletic profile. He's speedy, I'll tell you that off the rip, but we're going to be talking about strengths, weaknesses, who was on the board for the Ravens. Did they pass up a bunch of good guys? Should they have taken a guy here, a guy there? We're also going to get into what it means for Baltimore's defense as a whole. So what does it mean for the corners on the roster? What does it mean for some of the other positions in need? There are a bunch of different stories to unpack there, and then we will get into some day two targets in the final part of the show. We'll also be talking about day two a bunch on our Jesus, my days are messed up. It's Friday today. So live streaming on the Friday episode. We're going to have another episode coming out really just a few hours, 6 a.m. So we're going to talk about one day two options, but also was Nate Wiggins the right pick for the Ravens? And we'll talk about that a little bit here as well. I see Seven saying, I hope we trade up to grab a tackle or Keon Coleman, which we'll talk about Seven in the final part of the show a little bit. I do want to talk about Nate Wiggins a little bit, but I don't hate that idea. So be sure to stay tuned for that. The Handy family saying, yes, best cover corner out there. Cooper was not the better option. So Wiggins is someone, let's just again get into his profile first. 6'1", right over, he doesn't weigh a lot. I think 173-ish pounds. He's slender. He has the frame almost reminds me a little bit of Marcus Peters in terms of Marcus Peters is not a big physical. Like Marlon Humphrey, you look at Marlon's frame, big physical guy. Brandon Stevens, big, physical. That's the type of frame the Ravens like. But the allure in a Nate Wiggins is we know the NFL is a speed game now, right? The NFL is a speed league. The Chiefs trade up with Buffalo. They take Xavier Worthy. In the division, you have a bunch of speed guys across all three teams. Nate Wiggins, sub 4.3, 40 time, 4.28, I believe that is. He can run with anybody. That's what you need in today's league. So when you talk about some of these corners and some of the prototypical things, the Ravens do like speed on the outside. So we're going to see how the Ravens deploy him. It can also mean a bunch of versatility options for multiple different players on the Ravens defense. And we'll dive more into that in the second part of the show. But for the Wiggins part of it, he can play on the outside. He can throw him in the slot. I think he also has some safety experience, or he has the profile to certainly play some safety if they want. The Ravens are a team, and the NFL is honestly kind of doing this too. It's a positionless defense. In my opinion, with the Ravens, they love, and if you've listened to Locked On Ravens, if you are an everydayer of the show, first of all, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much for being here and tuning in every single day, even on these late live streams. But the Ravens love those three cornerback rotations, especially on the outside. They like having three really good, competent cornerbacks. Ronald Darby was really good for them last season, right? But Ronald Darby was not necessarily a long-term option. We saw the Ravens do almost this exact thing back in 2017. The last time they took a cornerback in the first round was Marlon Humphrey in 2017. That was not a position of need for the Ravens, or at least it wasn't the biggest position of need for the Ravens on their roster, at least short term. They had Brandon Carr. They had Jimmy Smith. They had two really quality outside cornerbacks, and a lot of people at the time Marlon was taken, the whole conversation was, well, why would you take a corner? You already have two really good ones. Go take a position of need. Go take a position that you need more. But what do we now know? Brandon Carr left a couple years later, and obviously Jimmy retired a few years later as well. And now Marlon, you take a player that has potential and has that ceiling. And now Marlon has had plenty of successful years being the top guy in Baltimore. With Nate Wiggins, there are conversations about Marlon's contract that are going to continue to get louder. Brandon Stevens is not signed to an extension yet. Hopefully that comes down the pipeline, but at the time of this recording, it hasn't happened. So Wiggins is a player that for the short term, you can deploy him in a bunch of different ways. And depending on how the Ravens want to use him, and here's the other part of this too, and this is, it kind of fits in this. I'll say it now though. It fits in the second segment. I'll say it now. The reason I think that this, to me, you can deploy him in multiple different ways is because with Patrick Queen now gone, you are less inclined, if you're the Ravens, to force two inside linebackers onto the field. You can play a dime linebacker. You can move a guy in there. You can have multiple players from the secondary in there with just Roquan and not a second inside linebacker. So you can use a Kyle Hamilton more so all over the field. And the Ravens already did that, of course. You can use a Nate Wiggins all over the field. You can even kick Marlon into the slot if you want to. Nate Wiggins is a very versatile player. Now, some of the conversation, and I said it was about who was the better corner on the board. Was it Kool-Aid McKinstry? Was it Cooper DeJean? Or was it Nate Wiggins? I would have been fine with any of them. The more the draft process went on, I know my final prediction, if you listen to, it's technically not this morning anymore, but if you listen to Thursday's 6 a.m. episode, I had the Ravens taking Xavier Legette. The more I went over it, though, over the course of the day, and I had kind of been thinking about this for a little bit, I'm just like, corner makes so much sense for them. The Ravens invest heavy in their secondary, whether it's money, whether it's draft capital. It's been a consistent theme over the course of their franchise history. Now, the corner board was actually crazy. I mean, you look back on it, Terrion Arnold fell to, 24? Detroit traded up for him. I mean, he was a guy that was expected to go in the top 15, top 20 max. Kenyon Mitchell, I forget where Kenyon Mitchell went, but it was a lot later than people thought. I think it was Philadelphia, right? Philadelphia at 22. Again, the corner class, the Ravens had their pick of their guys, not the top two, obviously. But apparently John Harbaugh said he was in the defensive meeting room and he said, man, what if Nate Wiggins falls to us at 30? How crazy would that be? The Ravens, and I think Eric DeCosta said he was around 13 to 15 on their board or 13 to 20 on their board. I can't remember exactly what he said. But to me, I think it's a fine pick. It's not a pick that, to me, like I would have, the Terrion Arnold thing, I really think Baltimore, I would have been more than happy if Baltimore traded up for a guy like Terrion Arnold at 24. But Wiggins is somebody in a speed league. You need speed corners, and Wiggins can keep up. Again, Xavier Worthy goes to Kansas City, all those divisional speedsters. I think that Baltimore did make a very solid pick here. I see Iram saying, honest question, do you think this pick will get us over the hump, i.e. having enough to beat the Chiefs this year? I think it helps. I mean, the Chiefs, not only did they get Xavier Worthy in the draft, but they signed Marquise Brown, who we know is a speedster. We know that for the NFL, we see all of these deep threats. And some of the issues that maybe these bigger, more physical corners have is they get beat off the line quickly and the recovery speed isn't there. And one of the things about Nate Wiggins is his recovery speed is incredible. He can get beat off the line. And look, anybody can get beat off the line. It's not like anybody's immune to it. But when he gets beat off the line and a guy goes deep, Wiggins is able to recover with that 4.28 speed. Again, the frame is a little slender. He sometimes isn't as willing in the run game, but here's my thing. The Ravens believe that they can put weight on him. Right? I think the Ravens with this pick, obviously, you're probably not going to get it this upcoming season, but I think the Ravens do believe that training, having the first year under his belt after 2024 is over, getting him on an off-season program, they believe that he can put on some weight and he can carry that weight to get a little bit bigger. He can get washed out sometimes. I mean, that's just what having a smaller, slender frame does. I mean, it's natural, but I think it goes against a little bit of what the Ravens like in corners, some of the things they like. But I think, look, it's easier to put weight on a guy instead of teaching the ball skills, teaching the speed, right? So it's a balance, obviously, but I think Baltimore believes that they can get Wiggins to where they feel like. And again, Sosa, yeah, saying solid pick, won't get beat deep 1,000%. I see Handy Family saying Devontae from North Carolina, I bet he's our guy. I expect the Ravens to take a wide receiver on Friday, 100%. I guess today, since we're recording it to 11. So yeah, I'm excited to see, and I think it's going to be good. I see Brandon Shields checking in saying EDC Wizard Nate Wiggins or should be happy, plus competition for Humphrey. I'm down on Marlon at the moment. Great day one for Ravens flock. I personally expect Marlon to have a bounce back year. I know the injuries kind of took a toll on him last season. I see the Handy Family saying Marlon about to get his bag. Now he knows what this could possibly mean. The Ravens can have all three guys and have all guys coexist, right? I think, in my opinion, and yeah, I'll get in his bag. I see what you're saying. Yeah, but again, I think this is a bounce back year for Marlon. I 100% agree with that. But we're going to continue talking Nate Wiggins here on Locked On Ravens coming up on this live edition, 2 a.m. Eastern time. I think this is the latest live stream I have ever done on Locked On Ravens. So coming up, we're going to be talking a lot about who Wiggins is more, but also what it means for Baltimore's defense and continue our conversation. Stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. And when you're hiring for small businesses, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding people to connect with, networking, looking for jobs, getting recommended for jobs. LinkedIn has been great. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is consistently finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Post your job for free at LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, Black and Mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher live, still talking with you here on this Friday morning. We are 2:15 a.m. Eastern time. Really appreciate everybody checking in. Maybe we got some West Coasters. It's about 11:15 over there. Maybe East Coasters staying up 2:15. Really appreciate everybody checking in. The Ravens taking Nate Wiggins in the first round at number 30. I'm really glad Baltimore didn't trade the pick, honestly. I mean, look, would have been great to get some extra draft capital, but I feel like the Ravens can still maneuver up and down the draft board on day 2 and day 3. We'll get into day 2 in the third part of the show, but let's keep talking about what this means for the Ravens defense and talking about Nate Wiggins himself. To me, I think that Wiggins is a player that can make an immediate impact. But again, it's going to come down to where Baltimore feels their slot position is. Because in reality, they re-signed Arthur Millette to a 2-year deal. I expect him to win that job, but you have Ardarius Washington, Wiggins can play there. Marlon can play there. They're going to be rotating in a lot of guys. And part of this is just keeping guys fresh and keeping them in rotation. As I talked about, Baltimore loves doing this with their corners, particularly at corner. And look, it's a lot of positions Baltimore likes dealing with, but we have talked about it. There are multiple different examples over the last, however far you want to go back, where the Ravens love rotating guys in at cornerback. So in my opinion, the Ravens take a corner here because they want to continue the high-level play. And this isn't just a pick for next season. This is a pick far down the line for the future. That is part of what the BPA strategy is. Now, for the Ravens, the BPA was still at a position of need. So it all worked out there. I see Robbie C saying, what did you think of all the offensive players going first, KO? I think everybody, and if you're listening to this, you probably agree here, Michael Penix was the shock of the first round to me, probably to everybody. There were a few that I was like, all right, that's a little bit of a reach, or that's a weird pick. Michael Penix going to Atlanta at 8, that's a really valuable pick. There was a lot of conversation about trading out of that pick or Atlanta taking some edge rusher help because they really don't have anybody right now. The Michael Penix pick was crazy, unreal. They signed Kirk Cousins with that massive contract. Michael Penix is now, that 8th overall pick. You don't just sit the 8th overall pick for multiple seasons, but you also don't, no one's going to take that Cousins contract. There was a run on quarterbacks early, though, and that to me helped set the tone. It pushed all the offensive linemen down to the middle of the first round. That pushed all the corners down to the end of the first round. Once Tyler Guyton went off the board at 29, there was no other offensive lineman I would have felt fit the 30th pick overall for the Ravens. Now, rumors, and again, I don't know how true these are or not, rumors say that maybe the Ravens would have taken Cooper DeJean if Nate Wiggins was not on the board, but Nate Wiggins was their guy. And that's how it works, right? All these different teams evaluate prospects in all different phases. They value certain things. They don't value other things. So one player that maybe people throughout the draft process, right, myself going over it, maybe there's not a ton of value. And I thought Wiggins was a fine player. I wasn't mad at the pick at all. But there are some guys that teams just value a lot higher than consensus. And I think for Wiggins, there was a conversation about where he'd go. I think it was end of first, early second. Baltimore made sure that they got their guy here. Or I'm about Marlon saying Marlon's very injury prone. We're paying him a lot. We saw last year we can have a top 5 defense without him. I don't know. We need some offensive stars. The Chiefs kind of traumatized me. I think the Chiefs traumatized a lot of Ravens fans. I don't think you're alone there, Ram. And I wish it didn't happen that way, but it did. Marlon's somebody where the contract is going to start to get very loud over the next couple of seasons as it continues to go up. Maybe restructures, maybe reworking. It's going to have a thing, but there are potential outs coming up. And if they feel like they can get cap elsewhere, maybe they feel confident enough in a Brandon Stevens and Nate Wiggins to hold things down. And maybe Marlon chops off a year. I don't know. But that conversation is going to get louder as the years go on here. I also see a bunch of comments. Oh, man, I see Rocco DeSangro checking in. Thursday, Rock, you could have hopped on here with me, man. If you weren't sleeping, he's probably out of the chat by now. This was 8 minutes ago. I'm trying to read as many comments as I can, so I apologize if I miss any here. Robot Wrestler saying, locked on after dark. I appreciate you. We're saying 10 p.m. in Alaska. Still light outside at 10 p.m. Man, I'm telling you. Let's go. I appreciate you checking in here. Now, I see Sticks saying this pick is a contingency plan to Brandon Stevens' upcoming contract. I don't necessarily disagree with this, but what I will say is that I think either way, the Ravens now have the contingency plan. I don't think the Ravens made this pick with Brandon Stevens in mind, but I also think they made it with the understanding of the corner room is a little bit in flux right now, and securing a long-term piece with some uncertainty there helps. Now, it also helps. Wiggins is a very fast player with the speed, fits the modern-day NFL. But for me, I think that Baltimore is going to work out their corner room where I don't know how many more years Marlon has left in a Ravens uniform. Again, we can have that conversation at a different time. But for this season, a cornerback room, and you can tell me how confident you are in it if you're listening, Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins. Those are your top 3 right now on the outside. I'm feeling pretty good with that. Fits what the Ravens like to do. Fits the Ravens' MO. Not a shocking pick. I think as the process went on, a lot of people just kind of came to terms of, yeah, offensive line's a pretty big need. Yeah, wide receiver, you can argue that too. I know Bateman got the extension. yeah, maybe an edge guy, maybe this, but it just felt like it was corner. I mean, it's draft day went on Thursday. I'm like, man, it's got to be corner, doesn't it? I see Adam saying good move, EDC, Robbie C, Ravens flop repping in California. Checking out. I was in California for a little bit, lived in Pasadena and on Venice Beach, so got a lot of love for California out there, Robbie. Rick, check it in. Rick, I appreciate you tuning in, man. You've been all over the place. You were with us for Ryan. Hope you enjoyed that. And now checking in on Locked On Ravens. And he is saying relish, which if you didn't know, if you're listening here, I am a big relish fan as opposed to ketchup and mustard. Now, I see Adam saying put Wiggins on the outside. I think that's where he starts. I think that he can play slot, but I think you can put him on the outside and feel comfortable there. The thing is, how are you rotating these guys in and out, right? Are you sitting Marlon for X amount of snaps? Are you sitting Brandon Stevens for X amount of snaps? And you're favoring Wiggins there? And I've talked about this. If this 30th pick, whoever it is, they have to play. You cannot sit a guy for a year. Now, again, doesn't have to be 100% of snaps. It's not going to be that way. But he has to have a role, especially with where the Ravens are right now. See the Handy family saying Ravens need to re-sign B. Steve now before he has a breakout season. We can't afford him like we did for Rashad Bateman. Sometimes it depends on the player, Handy family. We saw the Ravens sign Broderick Washington to an extension during last offseason. Now, apparently they tried to do the same thing with Justin Madubuike, but he ended up betting on himself. He declined it, said, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. Obviously, it worked out well for him. So I think the Ravens try, but some players, they want to take that bet on themselves. And look, for some guys, it works out. For some guys, they don't, but it all works out. Rick saying you win here, Zach and Rocco. Yeah, Zach checked in early. Rocco also. I think they're both gone now, Rick. But, yeah, they could have hopped off, man. I would have let them in here. So they missed out on their opportunity here. I feel like right now, though, the consensus about the Wiggins pick, some people are really excited about it. And I'm pretty excited about it, right? But other people are worried that, there wasn't an offensive lineman taken. The offensive line run happened in the middle portion, essentially. There was nobody that I felt comfortable with on the offensive line taking them at 30. Like, we can talk about guys at 62. We'll get into that in a couple minutes in the final part of the live show here. But there was no offensive lineman after Tyler Guyton, went where I'm saying, oh, yeah, that guy. I mean, even Jordan Morgan went, and that was a guy a lot of people liked as well. I know Kingsley's a player that maybe some people like, but I don't think he's fallen to 62. Patrick Paul, those guys aren't going to be there at 62. Maybe they trade up, right? There are a bunch of good receivers sold off from the board. A.D. Mitchell, Keon Coleman. I'm bleeding into the final part of the show, though. So let's just go to the final. Let's go to the final break. We'll check back in. We'll talk day 2 prospects because there are a lot of guys that the Ravens can take advantage of their falls and give them a nice little landing spot. So be sure to stay tuned. We got a lot to still get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And I certainly have a competitive side. I've definitely been told I'm a competitive person before, and it is true, but we all have competitive sides, right? My competitive side, though, is a big fan of Monopoly Go. When you're talking about Monopoly Go, I'm sure you've heard of it, right? It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can now charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. Now I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself, and leaderboards show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with your friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. To get in on the game and join your friends, download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. We are back. Locked On Ravens Live. Kevin Oestreicher checking in with you late night, well, early morning, I guess now at this point. Locked On Ravens live stream. Really appreciate everybody who was here with me live. Also, you know what? If you were sleeping, if you're listening to this after the fact, really appreciate you checking it out after the fact. Be sure to subscribe here to the channel. Follow along in audio form as well. We have a ton of draft content coming. Obviously, we're doing 2 more live shows after this one. Not directly. I'd be up till 8 in the morning. But we're doing one on Friday night. We're doing one on Saturday afternoon to round out both day 2 and day 3 of the draft. We'll also have regularly scheduled 6 a.m. programming. Today at 6 a.m., a new episode is coming out completely different to this one. Also, we'll have a 6 a.m. episode on Saturday and Sunday, so 7 days a week this week on Locked On Ravens. Let's get back into the comments here and get back into the day 2 conversation. So Nate Wiggins is the Ravens' first pick. But what else can they do? I mean, obviously the offensive line is what they can do, right? There was a lot of conversation about it. Are they going to take an offensive lineman at 30? Again, the way the board fell, in my opinion, there were not offensive linemen worthy of that pick based off of my rankings. Again, every team has it differently, but the Ravens loved Wiggins, and that's exactly where we're talking about for Baltimore. So at 62, exterior guys, interior guys. Again, I mentioned I don't think Kings is going to be there. I don't think Patrick Paul is going to be there. I think Kieran out of BYU, he might be there, but I expect these offensive linemen to go a little earlier than projected. So if you want to talk about some other players, Dominic Puny is another one. Haynes from Connecticut is one as well. UConn. There were some interior guys, even like a Coleman from TCU. Those players can be valuable, but it's a matter of where they are on your board in particular. So in my opinion, the Ravens need to take at least one offensive lineman on day 2. It's just that they need to come out of this draft with at least one guy you can at least feel good about as a potential starter. If a guy was picked at 30, that guy would be the obvious plug and play. You're going to have to play him. Now, a bunch of teams in the AFC North, in fact, the only other 2 that had picks in the first round, they did get better on their offensive line. Amarius Mims went to Cincinnati. We talked about Amarius Mims a ton on this show. I think that's a solid pick for them. I don't think Trent Brown's a long-term piece there. You can maybe kick Mims into guard early if you want to at left guard. I mean, his frame is massive, so I don't know how that's going to work out, but you can at least try it. And then the Steelers getting Troy Fautanu, which I think he fell a little bit due to a medical concern, but man, good drafts all around from the AFC North as well. Now, let's look in the comments again. I'm scrolling a little bit here. Stick saying there's too many big contracts in the secondary. Oh, I lost the comment. Oh, well. Here we go. There's too many big contracts in the secondary. Marlowe, Marcus Williams, B. Stevens on the horizon. Kyle will be re-signed and tagged. Corner was a need, but the move screams contingency to me. I get it. I get it because you're right. And especially with the corner position, we have what we call premium positions in the NFL. Corner is one of those premium positions. Corner contracts come at a premium. Those are $60 million contracts, $70 million, $80, $90, $100, right? Those are bigger contracts for the bigger stars. If Wiggins balls out and gives you corner 2 production early, maybe second, third year, I mean, that's a guy that's already going to get a pretty decent contract. He maybe gives you even better than that in year 4 and the 5th year option. He's getting a huge bag, right? So to me, it's interesting because we don't know what the Brandon Stevens contract is going to look like. Stevens has had that one good year. If he can capitalize again in year 2 and have another great season, he's going to get a big contract. So if he leaves, you can slot in Wiggins. I wouldn't, I mean, Sticks, I agree with you. Like your point, I agree with contingency, but I do think that they also envision a world where all 3 of those guys are there long-term. And the reason I say that is because, as I said at the top of the show, Baltimore invests so much into their secondary, money-wise, draft capital-wise. I mean, it's the position that never fails for them. So I wouldn't be shocked if they were to pay or try to pay a bunch of these guys here. Dre check it in saying we did it. Yeah, Ravens made that pick 100%. I see Brandon saying be patient on day 2 and come out with Corley wide receiver and Fisher OT. I see Blake Fisher. The name is Blake Fisher. I've seen that a lot on Notre Dame. I think that would be really great. And I think there are other good wide receivers as well. Obviously, I mentioned at the end of that second segment, A.D. Mitchell and Keon Coleman and all those guys. Those guys probably won't be there. But you're talking about maybe a Corley, maybe a McConkey, maybe a Jalen Polk, for example. Ricky Pearsall went very early at 31. I thought that was a pretty big reach by San Francisco. The Leggett pick was pretty obvious. I mean, Carolina did. If he didn't go at 32, he was going at 33 if the Panthers didn't trade up. So that pick made a lot of sense. Carolina had him visit like 4 times or something. So in my opinion, that's probably what it's going to be. I see Shinobi saying we're going to trade up. I wouldn't be shocked to see the Ravens trade up one of their day 2 picks, whether it's a second round or third round. The Ravens have enough capital to do it. They can also move back if they wanted to, but I think the way the board has fallen, there are going to be continued guys that just get pushed down and pushed down and pushed down. And so to me, that bodes well for the Ravens, especially if more tight ends go off of the board, more quarterbacks go off of the board early. It'll push even more guys down there as well. I see Blake Fisher is a very popular name in the chat here. Mitchell's not going to fall, guys. I see in the chat everybody's talking about Mitchell. He's not going to fall. I agree. Shinobi says not getting Mitchell. If he falls, it would be insane. I know there's been all the conversation about some of the off-field stuff with Mitchell, some of those red flags. I'd be shocked if he falls all the way to 62. I wouldn't think. Now, Aram's saying we need firepower. I don't feel confident with Bateman as our number 2. So let's talk about Bateman a little bit, because we've talked about that the last couple of days. Obviously, on Wednesday, the Ravens signing Bateman to an extension through 2026. It's a solid move if the financial terms are right. We still don't have those terms right now. But for Bateman, the risk, and we talked about this yesterday, we had Kadri Ismail on. The risk in this is Bateman hasn't consistently produced yet. We've seen the flashes, we've seen the potential, but is this just a lesser version of what 2022 was when they gave Bateman that wide receiver 1 role and essentially went very, very young? Now, the difference is Zay Flowers proved himself in his rookie season. He's going to have to continue to prove it, but at least he showed that potential. So we're going to see, but with Bateman, it's just a matter of him and Lamar getting a full offseason, in my opinion. And the fact that he signed an extension and look, I said this, it does not take away that the Ravens still need a receiver. They need to take a guy. I think a day 2 guy. I think Jalen Polk would be awesome. I see a lot of people want Malachi Corey. I see Reese wants Malachi Corey. Adam's saying Coleman will be there. If Coleman's there, you take him. I think if Coleman's there at 62, that is insane value. But the thing with Bateman has been the injuries, right? If Bateman goes down, and I had said this even on the shows in the past month when the Ravens brought in Michael Gallup and Josh Reynolds, they signed Deontay Hardy. These are not moves that the Ravens are making to challenge Rashad Bateman. Last year, the Ravens had this kind of like who's number 2, who's number 3 going on the whole year between Bateman and Odell Beckham Jr., where I don't think we ever knew who the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3. I mean, technically, I guess it was Odell and then Bateman. You could argue maybe it was Bateman then Beckham, but I think it was Beckham then Bateman. But regardless, there's no one that Bateman has to look over his shoulder this year and say, oh, this guy's challenging me. They're putting full trust in Bateman. Sometimes it takes a little belief, but they dealt with a lot of injuries as well. But with Bateman, his rookie season, he missed the first, 6 games of his rookie year, comes back for the Chargers. Obviously, 2022 has the foot injury or whatever. I think it was a foot, right? Whatever it was, he missed the back half of the season. So for me, wide receiver is still a position you look at if you're the Ravens 1,000%. I see Reese saying we can still get a good tackle in the 3rd round. I agree. One of the reasons why it was a good year to need a tackle is it meant that you didn't have to necessarily take one in the 1st round. The Ravens will have options in the 2nd and 3rd rounds. Now, these players, depending on who it is, again, I think the other players like a Patrick Paul, for example, those guys are going to go pretty early in the 2nd round. But if you take a guy in the 2nd or 3rd round, it's no longer, okay, this guy's an automatic starter, plug and play, let's go. There's going to be a competition with Daniel Falele, which John Harbaugh did say was happening, so not necessarily a surprise, right? But to me, the Ravens have big needs. Offensive line is one of them. Wide receiver is not as big of a need anymore. You can argue with the Bateman extension, but it is still a need. You got to go there. They're probably going to take a running back at some point. Not on day 2, but I'm just saying. Wouldn't be shocked if they take a defensive lineman. The Ravens love taking defensive linemen. Backup quarterback is an option. Safety is an option. Maybe they double dip at corner, right? Maybe they double dip. I'd still love a Kyrie Jackson type of guy. So day 2 is going to be really interesting because we also could see the Ravens move up for a guy if there's a 2nd rounder that falls. You go trade one of your mid to late round picks. Go move up and get that guy. You want to surround Lamar Jackson and this Ravens team with the best possible players you can get, especially as we enter Lamar Jackson's prime. These are really, really important years, and I see Handy Family saying edge rusher as well. That's 100% right. Edge is a position with the Van Noy signing. Push it down a little bit in terms of the needs list. Apparently, the Ravens are really interested in Darius Robinson, who went to Arizona at 27, but I expect them to take an edge rusher a little bit later in the draft. And I see Reese saying Sion Vaki would be a good substitute safety. So, I agree. I think Avaki would be a good player. There are a bunch of safeties. The Ravens do actually need a safety because Geno Stone and Darryl Worley are both not on the team anymore, or at least Worley not at the moment. So, needs all the way around, but the Ravens going Nate Wiggins, Clemson, cornerback, at number 30. So I have you here today on this live edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be right back here in just a couple of hours, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Going to go record it right now, put out another episode. So be sure to check that out if you haven't already. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, follow along in audio form, the whole 9 yards, bringing you 5 days a week. This week it's 7. We're doing live shows and regular shows all throughout the weekend of Ravens content. Stay tuned. I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.